Intellectual Property is proudly brought to you by Adams & Adams, rooted in 100 years of excellence in intellectual property law.
You're tuning into the Intellectual Property Show on Summit. I'm Stefan Lamprecht, and today's program deals with using intellectual property to expand your current business revenues and increase market share. Our guest today in the studio is Gail MacLeod, Managing Director of Strategic Communications. Welcome to the show, Gail.
Thank you, Stefan. Good to be here.
Gail, if I understand correctly, you're on the creative side of intellectual property. Is there something like a creative side? How does that work? Tell us a bit more.
Stefan, we assist on the commercialization of intellectual property through the creation of brands, looking at market opportunity, assessing market pull. So we can see where there's an opportunity in the market and back engineer or design with technologists and people that have created opportunities to engineer and push it into the market.
Okay. I think a lot of these discussions is more focused on the technology push kind of thing.
Yes.
And so you come from the other side and see what the market wants and how to deal with that.
Every day we analyze the market. We analyze where there's a gap in various sectors in the market. Yes. So we look at where the opportunity exists and then look at filling that opportunity. It helps to guarantee to a degree the opportunity of sales and return revenue for the business plan based on the marketing model.
If you think about these discussions we're having about this so-called innovation chasm or the inability to get innovations into the market, do you think it's as a lack of adequate focus on the market?
I think that the market deserves and demands to be focused upon in terms of what is happening in socioeconomic times, where society as a whole is moving, what the needs are of the people and the consumer base as a whole.
Yeah.
And when one looks at what the needs are, yes, I think that is a good way to engineer the opportunity.
Okay.
Better so than the push.
Okay. Can you give us an example of something like that you've worked with?
We work in a number of sectors, and we work from cement-based companies through to IT-based companies and across in the FMCG environment. So in terms of looking at where market pull opportunities exist, we did a project for a dairy where we looked at an opportunity that existed within the market. We looked at what market share was, what the market gap was that we wanted to take, and looked at engineering and developing a product that was based specifically on that, along the lines of saying that what are the returns going to be throughout the period, therefore what is the lifespan of the brand that we were creating and the intrinsic we developed in Germany for the national and international markets.
And that includes looking at all the aspects of trademarks and patents required to fulfill that market opportunity.
Yes, it does. It looks not only at the intrinsic, at the makeup of the product, but it also looks at what are we going to brand it, what is relevant for the market, how are we going to protect it. If it's intrinsically based, how do we protect that intrinsic platform, as well as how do we dress it, and how do we make it relevant for the market of today.
Yeah. And this market-based approach to managing intellectual property or managing innovation, if you want to put it that way, is that something that's just within the grasp of larger companies? Small companies, can they also take that approach?
Yes, it's a bit cost prohibitive for the smaller company, but yes, it's definitely something to look at. I find what happens with the smaller companies that they focus more on getting the product branded than they do in terms of the intellectual property value of it. They may also look at distribution channels as an ownership platform versus owning the technology itself and licensing that technology and on-selling those licenses. And I think that's a big challenge between the small company and the big company. I had somebody in my office just the other day that has looked at that, the distribution rights rather than licensing the actual technology itself and how to commercialize the technology.
You raise an interesting point. I mean, if you think a lot of the criticism that we get from abroad talking about this whole thing of Afro-pessimism towards technology, but if we don't establish those brands with our technology, then people will not recognize that some of those inventions or innovations are from South Africa.
We've got a very exciting innovations platform in South Africa, and I think we've seen a lot of that through the DTI and through other programs that are in place in South Africa.
Yeah.
And certainly when looking at innovations that exist, we have a footprint that is global in the extreme with regard to the opportunity, not only from the De Beers mining side of the business down to the small entrepreneur, right through that platform.
And on the consumer side, think about a lot of our consumer products. How are we faring there?
We're faring very well. If we look at some of the alcoholic beverages, we're second in the world on some of our brands.
Okay.
And that's also by royalty, by licensing, selling through different territories and areas. So on the FMCG, a lot of R&D is also taking place in South Africa. A lot of the global companies obviously have global centres of innovation and R&D where they develop that.
Yeah.
Yet we're finding more and more of that is coming from South Africa.
Okay. Well, that's excellent news. It sounds very... I mean, we are so used to seeing international products coming into South Africa, but it's nice to hear that there are also South African entrepreneurs and businesses that are having success, not just here, but worldwide.
Absolutely. And if you look in the various sectors, if you look at as I say, at the mining sector particularly, there's some very exciting innovations that are happening. The need to reduce fines on coal, the need to look at other technologies for Sasol and those areas, and the phenomenal technologies that they're developing for the global footprint.
Okay, that's very interesting. Now, typically at what stage, if you're an entrepreneur or if you're a business executive, at what stage should you start engaging with intellectual property, making plans for managing intellectual property?
Stefan, I believe that should happen right at the beginning. What we find with an entrepreneur is that they look at the full picture, and the intellectual property tends to come at a later stage, focusing on, again, the distribution side. And I find that quite sad because I think the greater revenue comes through the intellectual property and the understanding of the distribution and the management of the royalty licensing of that side of the business. So it really should come right at the beginning.
It's something that you should think of right up front.
It's something that one should think of right up front, analyse up front, and also consider in the business plan how you're going to manage the intellectual property of the organisation as it grows.
Okay. If you have to give advice to an entrepreneur or a business executive regarding intellectual property and how to develop this IP platform for revenues, what advice would you give?
I would say that entrepreneur firstly should understand the value of the intellectual property. They should attempt to understand the real value of what it is that they're creating. And if they can understand that, they can then start to look at how they can sell it offshore, how they can sell it in different territories. And I often find that they don't truly understand the real value of what it is that they've created and how to maximize that from a fiscal point of view.
Thank you very much for joining us in the studio today and talking a little bit more on the creative side and the development side of intellectual property. Thanks, Gail.
Thank you, Stefan.
Thanks. If you want to find out more about the support and funding available to help you do the things we're talking about, then don't miss next week's episode, same time here on the Intellectual Property Show on Summit. Until then, from me, Stefan Lamprecht, good night.
Intellectual Property was proudly brought to you by Adams and Adams, rooted in 100 years of excellence in intellectual property law.